So, Ancoris, you have launched a new Google Cloud service, which is Ancoris GreenLab. So the obvious starting point would be just a sort of high-level view of why the need to introduce this.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the key thing here is that obviously sustainability in everyone's agenda. That's why we're talking, etc. But one of the things that we also try to do is cloud platforms in the market are, competing on lots of different angles, and from a technology point of view, there are areas where they're very similar, areas where they've got differentiators, and we try to sort of really focus on Google's key differentiators and Google's advantages in the market. And one of them is actually non-technical, which is Google being the cleanest cloud, as they call themselves, in the market. And there's lots of different data points that you can see online around that statement. But Google is already carbon neutral, but they have with offsets, of course, but they trying to be carbon free and have carbon free energy across all the data centers by 2030. In 2007, so a long time ago now, they were the first company of their size to commit to achieving carbon neutrality. And actually, since 2017, they have not only matched the sort of electricity they consume, they've matched every single carbon emissions that they've emitted since the founding of Google. So Google very, very committed to this. And what we are trying to do is to actually surface this to customers, because organizations choose to move to the cloud for all sorts of reasons. And we can touch on that in a second, but not a lot of them are actually adding the carbon footprint reduction as a driver to do so. So actually adding this to the business case to move to the cloud. So, in a very simplistic way, what our solution does is discover what you have. So we deploy Google Cloud software to discover what an organization has running in their data centers or in their co-location providers, or wherever they're running their systems, and give them a migration plan, what this would look like in the cloud, financially, technically, and also what this would contribute to their carbon footprint reduction as a business, which we believe is an important item to add to the business case that a lot of organizations are missing today, probably because there's not a lot of people focusing on this, and that's kind of where we think we can help.
Okay, and in terms of the actual, so you say you use the Google Cloud platform, and that then helps people to understand any decisions they're planning to make around their IT infrastructure, whether that might be keeping it on-prem or migrating to the cloud. So it sounds simple, but I guess there's a lot of complicated algorithms or maths that goes on, or how does it, I guess, arrive at that decision? You're better off sticking where you are, or yes, it's time to migrate it. Yeah, because there's sustainability, which as you allude to, is obviously a massive driver, but clearly companies also have budgets, and sometimes they might think, well, it's going to cost me a lot to be sustainable. I can be maybe slightly less sustainable and save a load of money. Yeah, just the sort of balance between sustainability and finance, I suppose.
Absolutely. So we believe that, that's a good point. And sustainability not only is important, it's also a very, very broad topic, right? So we're focusing actually on the carbon footprint reduction as one kind of element of that. And you're right, what happens sometimes is that people have to make choices, right? Between, yes, I want to drive these elements of sustainability, but equally, as with all the will in the world, there are budgets that people need to adhere to, and people need to make choices. And that's why when we position what we are kind of helping customers with in terms of understanding what a migration to the cloud would, how that would impact their carbon footprint goals, is exactly because in the way we position it is around adding this to your business case, because we believe that ultimately all organizations will move to the cloud there are a few kind of edge cases, but wholesale, all organizations are moving to the cloud at any given point, and every time there is a trigger to do something, people will look to the cloud to run their technology platforms. And therefore, what we're trying to do is to say, okay, when you look at those migrations, when you look at that project, all that transformation initiative, you're actually looking at that from a, is it more secure? Is it more scalable? Is it easier to manage, et cetera, et cetera? And then you build a business case. Most organizations build a business case and say, okay, this is going to cost me X to migrate. It's going to cost me X or cost me Y to run it in the cloud. So when I put it in another, Z to manage it, and when I put this all together, how does that compare to what I pay today? But that's just one angle of that. Then you need to look at, okay, but if I have less failures, or if the system is more scalable, then I provide better customer service. So I can add that. And what people are not a lot of organizations are doing is that, by the way, there's another angle to add to this to make the business case even stronger, which is actually I can help my overall organization's goals in terms of sustainability. So when you add all of those things, you should, build a really robust business case to go to the cloud, which is what we're trying to do with our solution.
And in terms of the granularity, you mentioned, and obviously sustainability covers a multitude of sins, shall we say, and there's the scopes 1, 2, and 3 of greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, how granular is your solution? Because obviously, there's the whole supply chain before the item, if you like, gets to your premises versus the I guess, what level of detail are you able to provide when people are making those kind of decisions?
Yeah, so there's two kind of elements to that. So actually, when you're running in the cloud, so if you already have systems running in Google and the other platforms more recently as well, Google actually provides you with a tool, a Google native tool, to help you with at the very, very granular level, to help you run your systems in the most efficient way. So not only will tell you, like in cloud, you can see how much you're paying for a specific service, a server or storage or whatever. He's actually now showing you also what's the carbon footprint of the pieces of Google Cloud you're using, and therefore you can be very granular because they've got all that data on how do you want to move. Do you want to run your systems in this Google data center, or you want to run in another data center that is more efficient? There are other elements like data sovereignty and stuff that you can't move kind of data that you have in running Google's data center in the US to the UK and vice versa. Not all the time. So there's kind of other elements, but you can actually add that as well to say the next time I build something, I can decide where the most carbon footprint. But when it comes to our solution, we're actually helping people with a trend, which is Google is carbon neutral. Google is has the ambition, as I mentioned, to be carbon free in the next 7-8 years. What we help is at the high level, so it's not as granular as you can, because you can't go into all of the levels of detail, as you say, supply chain and all of that you may or may not know, because this is kind of an entry level solution. We can do that, but this is a solution that will help you at the high level trend to say, if you move from where you are, this is what carbon footprint there, this is what it would look like if you move to the cloud. And therefore, you may gain, you may do further investigation in terms of making that number more granular and more robust, but actually you already know that directionally you are on the right path. So on average, if you look at some of the studies, you could if you're running your infrastructure in a data center that is not powered by green energy already, and by just moving to the cloud, kind of on average, you can save up to 80%, or can reduce your carbon footprint by almost 80%. So, which is a pretty significant reduction. Obviously, if you're running on a sort of cleaner data centers, uses cleaner energy, slightly less, but those are the kinds of things we look at.
Okay, and in terms of sort of example, I mean, you alluded to one quickly there, but are you able to share I know often, customers are reluctant to put their names to stuff, but are you able to share one or two examples where you've helped companies, or either just classic cases where you think, this tool will help people understand what the benefits are of moving from typically, I guess, an on-premise environment, or maybe, is it also from a cloud, one cloud to another as well, kind of thing?
Absolutely. And actually, so recently we've done a project with one of our customers, migrating their whole infrastructure for their customer-facing applications from a co-location provider to Google Cloud. And we spent a lot of time, and this is actually one of the things that triggered our thinking around this, is we spent quite a lot of, we got a really good relationship with the customer, really helped them understand, and we spent quite a lot of time helping them with their business case, i.e., what's the plan, how much is it going to cost, how much is it going to cost to actually run this in the cloud. Then look at the scalability elements. These are customer-facing applications, right? So currently, their current provider runs out of disk space or runs out of resources, whereas of course that doesn't happen in the cloud. So what's the impact of that when a customer can't access your application, right? There's a big business impact. It's not necessarily just this costs me X and now going to cost me Y, but actually there's more things to look into when you look at the migration. And actually this customer wants to grow at very high rate in the next few years. So also how you're going to cope with that scale, how you're going to cope with having increasing demand on your applications. And we spent a lot of time building a business case to go to the cloud. And actually, I think it would have helped, and this is one of the reasons I said that we thought about it, is that it would have helped if we also added this to the conversation, because actually the sustainability and the carbon footprint reduction is something that most companies will have in their own objectives. They'll have it in their kind of board level objectives. And this is another thing that will get you time with your board to actually explain, not only I'm going to make my applications probably more scalable, more secure, probably even run cheaper, and easier to manage, and etc. And by the way, it's also going to do this. And actually, I believe that in some cases that will get you more attention than some of the other elements when you're talking to the board. So that's exactly one of the kind of examples that I would call out. And I think if we have added this, and if we had that at the time, I think it would have been another really good element to add to their business case.
Yeah, in terms of, I've noticed there's a bit of a trend for sort of sustainability decision-making tools of one sort or another. Would you have a sort of checklist of the things that they should, people are looking at it, what's the must-haves of any kind of tool, and presumably that's what Ancoris does. So whether it's what I'm trying to say is whether there's a independent list, or if you just want to tell us what Ancoris does, because you think that's pretty much as good as it should be.
Yeah, of course. We are a technology company at heart. We help organizations adopt Google Cloud technologies, and we're not a ESG consultancy. So there's probably people that will have a better view of this. My view, though, is the main principle is the amount of data. So looking at the amount of data you have available to you and how you use it. As I mentioned, the cloud vendors tools in that example, they are, Google and the other cloud providers are investing a lot of time and money in getting really granular data in terms of that. Most of the times that doesn't exist, right? So you also need to make sure that you understand that it's better to keep it simple and keep pushing in the right direction, rather than also be too obsessed with granularity, because if the gains are that marginal, that's okay. You should look at that once you've kind of addressed the bigger things, which is, so for me, it's all about actually having the going in the right direction. If you can you should get as much data as you can possibly get your hands on, which is kind of but equally, if you can't get an enormous amount of data in your hands, you already know at a high level that directionally you're doing the right thing. And that for me would be kind of if I may give some advice, that would be my advice, which is also keeping it simple and keeping it directionally correct.
And since during the conversation, it seems to be that I think you reference, other than a few applications, it's pretty much a no-brainer for people to be moving to the cloud, and the sustainability is a sort of added bonus. So you do, at the moment, are you bumping into people that are actually going to the cloud for sustainability somewhere very high up on their list and the other benefits, or is it still very much it's a sort of commercial decision to do with savings and flexibility and agility and all the stuff the cloud provides, and the sustainability is a sort of nice add-on, or are you beginning to see more people, putting sustainability higher up that agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is it. I think what and I've personally been working in the cloud ecosystem for 10 years with other providers as well, and what we've seen over the years is an evolution in terms of the motivations to go to the cloud. So I don't think sustainability is a nice to have. What I do think is that is not at the forefront of that conversation yet. And one of the reasons why we launched this is exactly to start putting that as actually, let's even start with a conversation like this. And then, yes, you need to prove the rest, because you're not going to just move to something that's more sustainable if it doesn't work for you, as you mentioned at the very beginning, financially or technically, right? So you have to have all of it. But actually, what people are not doing today, or not a lot of, is driving the conversation this way. And to give you an example of kind of over my number of years of experience in this sector, is that when I started, selling cloud computing to organizations, I used to go to a lot of meetings, talk about security, and is the cloud secure because I'm running this elsewhere? And you go with all the certifications that the cloud vendors have and all of that. And actually, over the years, the conversation actually started shifting for people moving to the cloud because of security. So some people started moving to the cloud using security as a driver. Why? Because obviously, time and time again, it's got proven that the cloud is actually more secure. It is, these organizations, Google will spend a lot more money than any other organization in the world in security, and therefore you are benefiting from that if you move to the cloud. And the same with, cost used to be the main driver. Actually, cost isn't really the main driver anymore. It is about, flexibility, easy to manage. And what we're doing with this is bringing the sustainability piece that probably now may be a nice to have when people look at that, is actually why don't we lead the conversation with this? Why don't we actually start the conversation here and then kind of help you with all the other aspects as well? I do believe that you need all of it. You can't just, like security, right? It's more secure, but you also need to make sure that, your tech works and is going to take, a reasonable amount of time to migrate, that you can afford to do, and you can, all of that stuff, right? But yeah, so to answer your question, is that I think we are starting that shift from the nice to have to this being part of one of the leading factors.
And in terms of maybe just sort of wrapping up, people looking at this, because it is it's a relatively new area. I think these sort of IT sustainability tools. Mm-hmm. What would you advise? As with people moving to the cloud, they often pick on a particular application, sort of kick the tires, move it over. If that works, then they'll move others and then gradually get more confidence. I mean, would that be the same with that you wouldn't recommend that people go, right, we're going to do the sums, everything makes sense sustainably, we're going to chuck it all in the cloud tomorrow? It's more of a application by application until you've sort of built up confidence.
Yeah, no, it depends. So it depends on sometimes it's more efficient to do things quicker. Sometimes it is better to do it like that. Our motto, kind of our tagline at Ancoris is think big, start now, which means that, the idea is you think big, think about and maybe do something like a GreenLab exercise where you understand where you are. We can give you a plan for your migration, for your costs, for your sustainability impact. And then once you have that, directionally that's where you should be going, then let's start now and let's kind of get going. If there is one application, let's do one application. And you already on that path. Because the problem with sometimes you can't be too tactical, because if you just go one application, you're not looking at the overall picture. But if you look at the overall picture too much and you can analyze it to death, you may take another 2 or 3 years until you actually do something. So for us, it's about think big, start now, which is kind of also the classic agile principle of delivering value every step of the way. Not necessarily agile, people think it's just being agile and reacting to things quickly. Yes, that too. But agile methodology is about delivering value incrementally in every step of the way. Because the big bang projects, I think that's kind of that era is over, because unless you're building a building, which only the finished building actually gives you what you need. In most IT projects, you should try and kind of deliver value every step of the way, but with an overarching objective. So yeah, think big and start now is what we believe in.
Okay, well, it's lovely. We covered a bit of ground and it's been great insight. So Andre, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.